Hi again. In this video I want to talk about area and how area differs from perimeter. So what I want to start with is I want to start by drawing a rectangle over here, and I'm going to divide my rectangle into small centimeter squares. So I'm going to start off by dividing it horizontally that way, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 down that way. Okay, so now when we look at that, we've got, if we say each one of these squares is a centimetre, then down here we've got 4 centimetres, and across here we've got 5 centimetres. Now in the previous videos I've talked about perimeter and what perimeter is. So we know now that perimeter is the length around the outside of that shape. So if we wanted to work out the perimeter of this rectangle, it would simply be 4 plus 5 plus 4 plus 5 centimetres, which is 18 centimetres. Now, I want to talk about area in this case. Now, area differs from perimeter in that it's not the distance around the outside anymore, it's actually the space that makes up the inside of that rectangle. So if we were to work out the area of this particular shape, it would just be all of those little 1 centimetre squared added up. So we can simply add up all of these squares at the moment, and that will give us the area. So if we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So if we were to talk about area of this particular rectangle, it would be 20 squares. And because each one of these is a centimetre, they would be centimetres squared. So that would be our unit. Now, that's how we would do it if we had a shape and we wanted to break it up without really using much mathematics other than adding all of these squares up. We would simply just divide up any shape into small centimetres squared, and we would count up all of the squares, and that would be the area of that shape, because that would be how many squares make up the inside of that shape. But we don't always have rectangles, and we don't always have the time to divide up any of our shapes into all of these little squares. So we like to do things mathematically. We like to use a formula. So if we were to look at the values that I've given each one of my side lengths for this rectangle, we can come up with a formula here that would allow us to work out the area of any rectangle without actually having to divide them up into these shapes. So if I look at the value for my area, that's 20, then I look at the values that I've been given, really all I'd need to do, instead of having to count them up, knowing that this is 5 across and 4 up, all I'd need to do would be to multiply my 4 times 5 together, because we now have 4 groups of 5 squares. So we could simply do it that way. Now if I give each one of these values a variable, if I assign a letter to these instead of a value, I could say that 5 centimetres can be called my length, and 4 centimetres can be called my width. So now I've got a formula for my area, and that would be length times width. And you can use this formula really for any rectangle. You could even use this formula for squares, although for squares we do have another formula that we assign to squares, and that's, for one very important reason, and that is a square has got all side lengths are equal. So in this case we have a length and a width because they're different lengths. Usually in a rectangle the lengths and the widths are different lengths, but in a square our lengths and our widths are the same. So instead of saying L and W, we can just say L and L. So now we've got a formula for a square that differs slightly from the formula for a rectangle, and that is, instead of saying L times W, we can say L times L. So then when we simplify that, knowing that L times L, that's going to give us L squared. So the formula for a square can be used as A equals L squared instead of A equals L times W for a rectangle. So this is for a rectangle, and this is for a square. Now, you don't have to use this formula for a square. You know, the length times width formula would work for a square and for a rectangle. They both have the same sort of properties. So really, you could just use one, but it helps to know both of them. So it's good to know that the area of a square is L squared, and the area of a rectangle is length times width. So those are your two basic area formulas for squares and rectangles.